Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I am so excited to welcome Anthony Bourdain here today. Mr. Bourdain is the host of the popular travel channel television show No Reservations and the author of the recently published book by the same name. He'll be interviewed by our very own Nate Keller of No Name fame. There'll be time for questions at the end, so please use this mic, which will be over there, so the cameras can get the noise. And there'll be time for book signing also. So please give a big round of applause.
So as a quick little intro, Anthony Bourdain was born in New York City in 1956, studied at Vassar College as well as the Culinary Institute of America. Before running kitchens at New York's Supper Club, 1 Fifth Avenue, and Sullivan's, his work has appeared in the New York Times, The Observer, Scotland on Sunday, The Face, Limb by Limb, Black Book, and The Independent. He's a contributing authority for Food Arts Magazine, and he is currently the executive chef at Brasserie Le Hall and lives in Manhattan. Welcome to Google.
Thank you.
So besides being the executive chef at the Brasserie Le Hall in New York, and being an accomplished author of 8 books, you're considered by many to be one of the most wry and witty personalities in the world of cooking. Once described as a guy who has more cojones and talent than good sense. How do you describe yourself?
I describe myself as just, a very lucky cook. I mean, this celebrity chef scam is really working out. Yeah, I wrote an obnoxious, over-testosterone memoir about my life, thinking honestly believing that a few people in New York, within the restaurant industry, would read it. I hoped very much that they would find it true and familiar. So it came as a real surprise to me that anyone west of Philadelphia read the thing or got it, much less that it's in all these languages. I mean, I started getting, after the book came out, I started getting calls. I was still in the kitchen because I figured, okay, the book's doing well now, but I'm going to need my day job soon. I better hang on to it. I started getting these calls from Japan and Australia, basically from other kitchens, and I'd hear the drunken clatter of pots and pans and other cooks in the background with some guy saying, "Dude, I just want to say you wrote my life, man." And alternately, I would get calls from those same places, like Japan, saying, "What is the matter with the fish on Monday?" And to which my answer was, I have no idea. I've written a very New York-centric book. I don't know. I've been pretty much just taking advantage of my opportunities as they arise. Right after the book turned out to do really well, some really credulous people from a television network came in and, actually said they wanted to, help subsidize my traveling around the world. I mean, I was no dummy. I'd done well with one book for my publisher, so I figured, I've got a great idea for you. I go anywhere I want in the world and do pretty much whatever I want. And you pay. So a publisher went for that, and then an even more credulous network, and that's pretty much, I've been milking that angle since. What can I tell you?
So you wrote 2 crime novels as well, Bone and Throat and Gone Bamboo. What inspired you to write those?
Well, that's kind of personal therapy. I spent a lot of time writing about, me, and what happens to me, and you can make a television about me, and here I am talking about me. So it's nice to escape into an alternate universe, create other characters, create an alternate universe where complex problems can be solved with guns and blunt objects. Unfortunately, you can't do that in the kitchen. That would be, wrong. It's funny though, fiction. I write a lot of nonfiction. I write about myself a lot, but in a sense, you could say things about yourself. You could talk about things in fiction that you wouldn't dare in nonfiction. So there's that as well.
What's your inspiration to cook and be in the kitchen?
My inspiration, I started as a dishwasher. The restaurant business, particularly back when I started, and for, in fact, hundreds, if not thousands of years, has been a refuge for misfits and for for the losers, for the people who can't make it in other enterprises, who either feel uncomfortable, they feel uncomfortable. People who are uncomfortable with their communication skills, or they've made unusual lifestyle choices, strange personal habits. You see a lot of, it's always been a welcome refuge, from the very beginning for immigrants of varying legality. And for that, it has been a magnet for a really interesting group of people. There is a common thread in all chefs' natures. I think of your sensualist. You like stuff that feels good. You have appetites beyond food. You like pretty colors and things that smell good and taste good. Less comfortable with having to deal with civilians. People out in the dining room. I think that's changed over the years. Now that cooking rather inexplicably has become a glamour profession. But I mean, I fell into the business because it would have me, and because it was a way of kind of joining up with a rock and roll band without ever having to learn how to play guitar. I mean, you got all the bennies of being in Motley Crue without having to play guitar. Even as a loser, we had no money, couldn't play guitar, but if you were a cook, there was a lot of sex and drugs, and food was free, and all the liquor you could steal. You could live pretty well, and this was long before cooking was glamorous. So it's pretty much, only gotten better. The truth is, I don't cook anymore now. I mean, I spend most of my time traveling around the world, making a show, or I spend most of my time eating and drinking now. And I don't, given a choice, people ask me, do you miss cooking? Well, I had 28 years of standing in a crowded New York kitchen, seeing nothing of the world. Even my dining public, the people people who didn't do what I did were an abstraction to me. I knew cooks, I knew restaurant culture. I worked while you civilians played. That meant holidays, weekends. All dinner hours. I got out at midnight, 1 o'clock, and who was there to hang out with at that hour? Other cooks and restaurant people. So I spent most of my time standing around in a submarine-sized space talking about dick for most of my adult life. That was pretty much the level of conversation, It gets a little tiring, Now I'm bitching about the thread count at the Four Seasons in Singapore, so... What are those red M&Ms doing there? God damn it, I told you to pick them out. Do I miss it? No.
So how do you think your book, Kitchen Confidential, sort of helped that along? You became one of the sort of original rock star chefs in the beginning when I was graduating culinary school. That led to people coming in, getting into the business, not just falling into the business, but wanting to be in the business.
It's funny. A lot of people come up to me, young kids who were. I hear one of two things. That I was on the fence about going to culinary school. I was really thinking about getting into the business, and I read your book, and it really convinced me to to pursue my dream. And I also hear I was thinking about getting into the restaurant business. I thought it was going to be really cool and glamorous, and then I read your book, and I realized no way. So. It's funny, though. I don't know how I've changed whether I've made it more glamorous or less, and I don't really kind of care. I still, if I'm thinking about who's reading my book or even who's watching the show, I'm still kind of uncertain about how normal people behave. I'm learning, I think. I'm trying. I'm always thinking about will the cooks at my restaurant think it's bullshit or not? Will they like it? You mentioned about the kind of glamorization, though, the rock and roll aspect of chefs. You had a guest here a few weeks back, Marco Pierre White, that was my hero. Okay, I vividly remember the day that we were all of us, and this is a measure of the times. Me and all my friends and everybody I knew were cooking, and we got a copy of Marco Pierre White's cookbook, White Heat. And this was the first time that you saw first these incredible, gorgeous color photographs of classically beautiful, meticulously crafted French food. And then these amazing black and white photographs of the chef himself. And here's this guy, gaunt, drawn, haunted looking, long, curly, nasty hair with a cigarette in his mouth in the kitchen. And we thought this is just the coolest thing we've ever seen. It was an electric charge because up until this point, the message to chefs was stay in the kitchen. The public likes to think that you're all fat French guys and that you're adorable, you know, and we knew we weren't. And here was the first guy who kind of looked like we did. And we thought, wow, it's possible to be a Michelin-starred chef and be yourself. He really just with that book, by being himself and by, you know, having his personality, he really introduced single-handedly, without meaning to, I'm sure, the whole concept of the kind of the rock and roll angle to chef, that you could listen to rock and roll and be a chef. I mean, up to that point, it was Paul Bocuse was pretty much the model. And, you know, I can't imagine what he listens to, you know, Yanni or some shit.
So you mentioned Marco Pierre White's personality, and reading your books, your personality comes through definitely on the forefront in all your books. So what inspires you to write like that?
I just write like I talk. I mean, you know, I'm a storyteller, and I write in a very conversational style. I'm very much a product of the kitchen, in that, you know, my language tends towards the hyperbolic. You know, to me, you know, I'm learning to discern gray areas now that I travel. I mean, travel has changed me in that respect, in that a lot of the absolutism that you know. You were either the worst person in the world, the most miserable rat bastard waiter who's ruined my life. I hate you. I want to kill you. I want to go to the funeral. I want to kill the mourners. Or you're the best waiter who ever lived. You know, I love you. You sold through all my specials. You saved my ass. You've been bringing me drinks all night. I love you. I want to bear your children. There was no middle ground. That's kind of, and I think my language reflects that kind of everything's going really great, or we are totally in the weeds. It's disaster of the kitchen. So I wrote very deliberately Kitchen Confidential in exactly the same language that I would use speaking to my cooks during the dinner rush, and I tend, when looking at the world, to be, you know, passionate and hyperbolic about things that I really love, or which just piss me off no end.
So nowadays, when you're not cooking, writing about cooking, or traveling to make documentaries about cooking, what do you like to do?
I'm having a pretty good time. You know, I have the best job in the world. I like hanging out with chefs around the world. I like. I mean, I'm most passionate about Southeast Asia. For me, perfect happiness. You know, the line between work and play is a very sort of permeable one. I mean, I essentially get paid to, you know, travel with my friends, a small crew of camera people who I'm very close with, and, you know, I'm drunk a lot on the show. You know, you know, it doesn't suck. You know, we go to Singapore, have a few drinks, you know, eat everything in sight, hang out with all the local chefs. I love that. I love, you know, eating my way around Singapore or Tokyo. I love going to Vietnam, Indonesia. You know, that satisfied not just my need for kind of sensation and flavors and colors and extremes, but it also fits very much into, you know, remember, I'd seen so little of the world till I was like 44. I hadn't been anywhere really. So to you know, after all that time, to find yourself so fortunate as to see this, to have your mind expand that much, to bring, you know, to learn that much, to see that much, and also to have it fit in with your little boy dreams of what an exotic and big world was going to be like. You know, 7, 8 years ago, I didn't think I was ever going to, you know, see, you know, Los Angeles. You know, I thought, this is it. I'm dying next to this friolator, you know. It's okay. I've had a good life. So to find myself in, you know, Sarawak, Borneo, in a longhouse, you know, eating pork, a freshly killed pork, and drinking homebrewed rice whiskey under a bouquet of human skulls with a bunch of ex-headhunters who were tattooed from chin to ankle. You know, that's pretty cool. You know, it's just like the movies, man, only better. And I have a lot of those moments, and I like it. You know, in my relaxation time, I like, you know, I would like to, you know, no shoes, definitely. I would like to be sitting under a palm tree with a stack of books and a beer. You know.
You're also a huge music fan.
I am.
What's your favorite music experience that you've ever had?
Well, you know, my burning bush, you know, the religious experience was seeing the Ramones for the first time. Music sucked so bad before, and so bad. You know, imagine a nightmare universe of nothing but like Loggins and Messina. You know, 3-hour Mellotron solos. You know, Rick Wakeman. Everyone's writing a rock opera. You know, just long, self-indulgent. You know, really tasteful solos. Just awful, awful, awful. And then suddenly rock and roll. I mean, Overnight was, you know, 3 chords, submoronic lyrics, and a beat, and, you know, all good again, and things started again. That was a really good, it was a good time for music. And in fact, when we were picking the theme music for the show, we sat down with John Spencer and Blues Explosion and just talked about music of that era. And we all sat around and talked about Richard Hell and the Voidoids and their guitarist Robert Quine in particular, and Tom Verlaine and television and that sound, and they totally got that. And you know, it was one of those, oh yeah, I love them too, and we basically said, that's the sound we want. You know, I think Funhouse by the Stooges is the single greatest album ever made, and perhaps Sonic Reducer by the Dead Boys, the single greatest song.
All right. What's your worst musical experience?
Worst musical experience? Billy Joel called me up and said he wanted to come to dinner, that he was a big fan, which was which was a real crisis for me, as I famously said, you know, if I hear you listening to his music in my kitchen, you are fired right now. You know, I just can't work with someone who visibly enjoys Billy Joel. And if you're a Grateful Dead fan, I have concerns about your work habits. Let's put it that way. So he shows up, first thing out of his mouth, he says, you know, I guess, you know, we don't have the same musical taste. You know, we ate and drank like a champion, but now he fucks with me all the time. You know, because every time I'm talking about, you know, Billy Joel is not allowed in my kitchen, he sneaks into my restaurant, has his picture taken in my kitchen with my cooks. And sends me photographs like, so I guess you do let Billy Joel in your kitchen. So that kind of sucks.
In the show,
it's like, you know, Rachel Ray slipping into my apartment at night. Moving my food around in the refrigerator, substituting product. I feel so violated, you know.
In the show, No Reservations, every once in a while you seem a little bit wary about what you're about to put in your mouth. Is there anything that you just absolutely won't eat?
No live monkey brain. Okay, that you have to draw a line somewhere. Is it food? You know, is it food? Is the cruelty involved? Is there any possibility that something this cruel and that goes against my deeply held principles about, like, what is food and what is a pet, for instance? Is there any possibility that it could actually be good? And also the social situation, very, very, very important to me. I mean, I would rather violate my own deeply held principles about you know, living things than offend my host. You know, often a very poor host. I'm very grateful to be where I am. I may not think, a snake wrapped around a bird sitting in plumage in my whiskey is such a great idea, but I'm certainly not going to go, ooh, you know, I'm not touching that. You know, I'm very, very lucky to have these experiences. I wouldn't have them were I to suddenly say, oh no, that's ooky. That's deeply offensive to people. You know, food is the purest expression of a culture, of a personal identity. People are, you know, offering you what gives them pleasure in these places that I go. And, you know, they're just not going to get it. If you say, I'm a vegetarian, that is not something that is going to be understood in the spirit in which you might understand it here. The iron doors will come down behind their eyes and say, you know, what do you mean you don't want my chicken? Fuck you. You know? That's the only chicken my family has. I just cooked it for you and you're not going to eat it. You know, that chicken's a big deal in a rice farmer's family in, you know, Mekong Delta. And so, you know, I try not to turn my nose up at anything. This has led to tragic comedy at times.
Yeah, was there, in a situation like that, was there ever a time when you ate something and immediately went, not such a good idea?
Well, I mean, I knew in Namibia with the Bushmen, you know, here was a situation I knew I wasn't getting out of. It's the, you know, it's a hunter-gatherer society. They had been fortunate enough to get a warthog, you know, drag it across the, you know, roaring heat of the Kalahari, hack it into chunks, throw, you know, by hand, throw a big, you know, scoop the crap onto the ground. They throw this thing in the fire, and the chief in front of the whole tribe, you know, here in a society where your personal worth is judged by, you know, he who brings meat and she who distributes meat. You know, that's what makes him the chief. You know, the last foot of unwashed poop shoot onto the fire for the very special part for the very special guest. You know, I mean, I knew. I had a pretty good idea what was going to be happening in a week, but I took one for the team.
Have you ever been truly surprised in a situation like that, where you thought not a good idea and it turned out to be one of the greatest?
Oh, durian. Durian's the most obvious answer. Durian, the stench of durian is room clearing. You know, it's been described as like eating custard in a lavatory, but I love it. I think it's it's one of those truly, for us in the West, it is a truly new flavor and a really exciting one. If you like stinky cheese, and I do, you know, it's not that far a leap to durian, but it is, you know, it looks like a stegosaurus. It causes fatalities when it falls from trees. The reek is just indescribable. It's illegal in hotels, public spaces, public transportation in all of Asia. There are signs on the wall, a picture of a durian with a red circle around it and a line. They will stop a plane on takeoff if they smell durian, you know, and unload it. But that's, you know, one of those pleasant surprises. You didn't think you were going to like it, but wow, thank you for introducing it to me. Happens, you know, all the time. I tell you, I was really happy. They had these beetles that they roasted in the tribe of Bushmen in the Kalahari, and, you know, those next to the warthog, it was delicious.
You mentioned Southeast Asia. Is there any specific town, village that was your absolute favorite place to eat?
Well, I love being in Vietnam because, you know, it's not just the food. You know, a perfect meal is a perfect confluence of other forces. It's the right sound in the background. It's the right smells in the air. It's who you're eating with. It's the colors. It's everything. It's the particular needs and feelings you might have brought to that particular time and place. I find myself most often in that zone in Vietnam. You know, everybody has a kind of place not their own that they instinctively, you know, love. I love that spectrum of flavors and colors. I love the Vietnamese for their generosity, their passion about food, about cooking and eating, and so that's my happy place. But if you're looking for sheer, you know, the center of, you know, food pornography, you know, where the real main vein, you know, most great food per square foot, you know, you could make a really good case for either Hong Kong or Singapore, and I shy towards Singapore because you get all of this great Chinese food, incredible Malay and Indian food, and these wonderful mutations of Chinese food that have occurred over hundreds, if not thousands of years as Chinese cultures moved down the China Straits. And so, and all in very affordable food stall, one chef, one dish joints, you know, where the guy making the chicken rice or the bak kut teh or the roast goose, that's all he's been doing his whole life, and maybe his parents did it and his grandparents. So, you know, you can bet that it's pretty damn good at making goose, and so that's a foodie wonderland.
So you appear in the new book, My Last Supper.
Yes.
What is your last meal request and why?
Roasted bone marrow. There's a restaurant in London, really very simple, Spartan, and they specialize, oddly enough, in respectfully prepared, impeccably sourced, traditional English countryside food. And they do a very simple dish of roasted veal bone marrow in the bone, a little toasted baguette and some sea salt. And it's, it's just, if God made butter, that's what it would taste like. It's just real good.
So you also have a portrait in that book as well. Can you tell us
I'm naked. I'm naked.
How about that
okay.
came about? And whose idea
They told me
that?
it was going to be like art, man. I don't know. Next thing you know, I'm on a dirty shag carpet getting rear mounted by Ron Jeremy. What? Don't make major career decisions on tequila. I think we can agree on that.
So in the 1950s, America's food industry turned towards prepackaged, preprocessed foods, which led giant industries to lead the way for America's almost now defunct food culture. There's a new movement sort of about, not new really, it's been going around for a couple decades now, but local food, eating local. Do you think that will have a major impact on how the country's food culture will evolve?
Well, I mean, I think you see it already. I mean, you go to Whole Foods in New York now. There's like 50 cash registers ringing away. It's like JFK Airport. You're up. Move it along, move it along. I think there's a real appetite for organic, for artisanally produced, for local and regional. I love the whole. I think those are really valuable alternatives. Anything that raises expectations of how good your produce can be, or supports local farmers, or creates a boutique pig rather than a battery-raised, a factory-raised pig. I want, chefs from strictly a greedy point of view, self-interested point of view. I want a pig that's led a happy life and fed good stuff. He's much tastier. I want foie gras that is raised in an atmosphere where they're happy and run around and are fed by hand for a few seconds a day by the same feeder. That makes stress-free, happy, delicious, unctuous, and oh so good foie gras. But by the same token, I mean, you need only go to, is it Ferry Street Market? Is it called?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, rich people go there. This is food for wealthy people. I like spending $1 for a lime. It's a really good lime. I'm glad I can afford it. I'm glad I can afford to eat it. I'm glad I can afford to serve it to my customers. But let's not kid ourselves. This is not the wave of the future, because most people can't afford to grow that stuff, and the great majority of the world can't afford to buy it. Don't try taking fertilizer away from a Vietnamese farmer, or pesticide. They need to squeeze out every little bit of food they can out of the ground, and maybe raise shrimp in between seasons in order to feed their families. And it's just not an option for much of the world. It's nice that we can all get into our SUVs and drive, burn up a lot of gas getting over to Whole Foods to pay 4 times the going rate. I think it's wonderful, and anything that raises awareness and makes us aspire to better and kinder and gentler and more sustainable is also a good thing. But for better or worse, these are it's nice to be financially secure. It is just not an option. You need only look at the ethnic and socioeconomic demographic at those places, those markets, to see. So as a food alternative and as a movement, those are incredibly valuable. They've changed. The slow food movement has changed menus in a very positive way. But as a brave new world and way to live for all of us. We're all going to return to an agrarian wonderland where we all go out and farm for 6 months out of the year without fertilizer. I think the Khmer Rouge had that idea. Okay, so I think it's a reality check is needed. Also, I come from a background where I don't really care if your tomato causes the occasional tumor in lab rats. Okay, as long as it's the best goddamn tomato there is. I'm in the pleasure business when I'm a chef. okay? My response, I'm not your dietitian, your ethicist, your priest. My responsibility is to give you as much pleasure during the meal period, to serve you the best tasting and enjoyable to eat meal possibly. I don't think you need to be advised on a running basis of the calorie count, for instance, or the ingredients. Just my responsibility is, do you have as much pleasure as possible at the table? I would marginally like it if you have a better chance of getting laid after dinner. Beyond that, you're on your own,
You mentioned an upcoming Christmas special you're doing. Tell us.
Yes. We were shooting in Berlin, and we got a call from Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age, who invited me to a concert, and I went. And at the end of the day, he had agreed to bring the entire band to shoot at a house in Connecticut, a utterly deranged and in bad taste and dysfunctional Christmas holiday special. And they composed original music for like every scene. They dressed up in the most god-awful, ugly Christmas sweaters that they bought off QFC. They did like Christmas carols, original music, gave us total access to their recorded music, and then took part in a family meal with my family at the end, where I cooked this kind of Martha Stewart, turkey instructional scene where I make turkey for the family and lay out tablescapes and the whole bit, and even got showered with stage blood at the end. I mean, it's pretty. They were amazing, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this show goes over, because it's the part where my niece and nephew get like blood sprayed in their face. There's a knife fight scene during the turkey dinner, and I like keeping the network in a state of constant fear and confusion, but we might have crossed the line here.
What are you doing for Thanksgiving?
Turkey, cranberry sauce, stuffing, and someone else's cooking. I want, it's all about the leftovers, the next day, cold turkey, and, sit in front of the TV, smoke a joint, watch some Simpsons reruns, eat leftover turkey. It's the best part of the holidays.
Well, I think we'd like to open it up to some question and answer from the large crowd that we have here today. So, please.
So, hi, I'm probably the closest thing you can call to a fan of yours. So I've had a lot of questions and I narrowed them down to two, so excuse me. The first is, I really liked your book, A Cook's Tour. I think it perfectly got what you just described, which is that a meal is not just the food, it's the culture and it's the environment and everything like that. And I really liked the show as well. I haven't read the new book, but I watched the show, No Reservations, and I think it kind of lost that understanding I think you had of food is tied with culture. It kind of skewed towards more being a travel show, maybe because it was on Discovery instead of Food Network. So any chance that in the future you might do more things about food, because we have enough cooking shows and we have enough travel shows. We don't need any more of those. I think this is the only thing that we had closest to being about food and people rather than...
It's always going to be a really food-centric show. I mean, there's been no pressure on... I mean, I have as close to Final Cut as anyone in the history of television has had. So, whatever tendency you think you're seeing with the show, can't blame it on the network or producers or anything like that. Some shows, we try... television networks have like to be formulaic. They like to figure out what worked last week and do that again and again and again. And I try very hard to do, keep them guessing. I don't want them to figure out even what worked last week, because I don't know that they do. We're moving on. Some shows are much more food, as I'm sure you've noticed, are much more food-centric than others. I mean, the fact is, Uzbekistan, once you've had, kebab, plav, and did I mention kebab? There's not much else in the food department. So some shows, which, it leads to extended, painful massage scenes. Romania, not a wonderland of food. So some shows, they're not an overview. We're not doing the best of this is the definitive, what you need to know about. It's very first person. This is what my experience trying to make a food-centric travel show was like on this given week in whatever place. Sometimes we mess up. Sometimes that's just not the chief focus of my interest. Cleveland, there was a lot of good food there, but I really wanted to play around with Harvey Pekar and do the whole American Splendor thing with his illustrators. But on the other hand, I mean, I think you're going to be very happy with the Hong Kong show, for instance. There's food in absolutely every scene, but that's kind of like life in Hong Kong. It's food, food, food. Singapore, it's food in every single scene. But I think I'm wary of the fact, writing about food and talking about food is a lot like doing porn. There are only so many adjectives when describing the tale of the lonely housewife and the horny pizza boy, How many ways are there to describe a salad? And you might notice it in the shows. We kind of set the scene and hope that you figure it out. I'm not saying, there's really a metallic taste to this and strangely minerally quality. I say that's awesome, man. Or, that's really good. So I hope there was no trend. Some shows are going to have not a lot of food. Some are going to have nothing but. Doing the best we can. You had another follow-up?
Yes. The second one is actually a more personal bone that I have to pick with you. You have been very notorious about scoffing at vegetarians and denouncing them of vegetarian thing, which I actually agree with, because most of food as it developed over the millennia has not been with vegetarianism in mind. These recipes were invented with meat. The only exception I personally think is Indian food.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I'm going to cut you off right now. I totally would not disagree with that. If you grew up, if it's your cultural or religious tradition to be vegetarian, I get that completely. And I've been to India and I've eaten, in fact, eaten very well vegetarian for weeks at a time. My complaint, my instinctive rage is based on, if you come from, I don't know, some wealthy, upper middle class community where, everybody's privileged and everybody has a car, like Berkeley, someplace like that, and you're lucky enough to travel this world, to go to Thailand, to go to Vietnam, to go to China. My God, these cultures so much older with incredible variety in their cooking cultures and distinct regional cuisines. In fact, most of which is based on meat. It just seems, rude to, as I mentioned earlier, to turn down anything that comes your way, any offer of food. It seems culturally, insensitive and incurious. If I have one virtue, it's curiosity, and I think my health and any concerns I might have about Fluffy. Or Quacky or whoever, they are secondary to my almost obligation to experience as much as I can of this incredibly diverse world in the limited time that I have. It is like walking into a museum. Finally, once in your life, getting to go to the Louvre and deciding before you walk in the door, I'm only going to look at paintings in the color red and blue. The others I don't need to see. That pisses me off. But I take your point completely on traditional vegetarian cultures, and that's fine with me. And you tend to have good tasting ones as well. The imitation meat products. That's not food, man. That's building material. Let's not kid ourselves.
I loved Kitchen Confidential. I cooked to relax, so it was really funny for me to read a book that was so much about freneticism kind of feeling. My question is actually, if you could talk about your creative process as a chef versus your creative process as a writer. Creative process as a chef, understand, I come from a really classical tradition of recreating bistro brasserie classics. I was never an innovator. There are times in my life when I thought I was an innovator and creating, pushing the envelope of bold new culinary combinations. People got hurt. People went bankrupt. So I'm very, I was best later in my career when I settled into, honoring classic, authentic French recipes. So, they're not really analogous. Writing, I don't take it seriously, okay? I see it like anything else. It's a job. You wake up, your first rule of writing is the first rule of of working in a kitchen, or you show up on time. You do the best you can. I show up on time. I write as much as I can. I do not read it. If I have one tip for aspiring writers, do not read your own work immediately. You know, I would tend to self-edit myself right into oblivion if I read my stuff fresh after I'd written it. So I'll write, stick it in a drawer. Maybe 2 months later, I've got a stack this big. I know full well, but by the time I read it, finish reading it the first time, it's only going to be this big. But that's still a pretty good stack. I'm just like, hey, I'm a writer after all. You know, you're not constantly kind of looping around editing yourself. And I just, you know, I don't know. Honestly, it comes easy for me. Writing is not hard. I've used language for a long time to, you know, manipulate events to my liking and or to my advantage. You know, to get into trouble, to get out of trouble. You know, to me, honest work is standing in a kitchen. Writing is, you know, I'm lucky to do it. So I really don't have much to tell you about I'm not a product of writing classes or you know, years of struggling away with an unfinished manuscript. I just, given the opportunity to tell the story and actually get paid for it too, you know, I'm grateful for the opportunity and I do the best I can.
Thank you.
Sure. Hi.
2 quick questions. The first being, in Tuscany, did they really hate that first meal that you prepared?
No. It was deliberately bad. That first meal in Tuscany was designed to be, you know, you don't mess with a classic like fettuccine carbonara, okay, first of all, with an Italian. You know, you don't add meatballs. In fact, there's no, in Italy, spaghetti and meatballs are 2 separate dishes. You never put meatballs in with the pasta. So no, it was a pretty ballistically designed menu to be wrong. First of all, it's Tuscany, and I'm cooking a couple of Sicilian dishes. That already. You know, my wife is from the north of Italy, and in the descending order of evil, okay? You know, the only thing worse than Americans are people from the south. Then there's Satan, and then there are people from Naples.
It was really fun to watch you cook, though.
Yeah, by the way, my wife played one of the disgruntled Italians. Yeah.
My second question is about the process you use to develop the narration.
Mm-hmm.
Do you kind of write that while you're out there, or do you come back home and then review the tape? And then...
Yeah, totally depends. We shoot about 60 to 80 hours of footage between 3 digital cameras on the road. Now, sometimes I know pretty much exactly what we're going to do. When we go to Singapore to do a show, I've been there many times before. I know exactly which places I want to go to, who we're going with. I could storyboard the whole episode in comic book form. I could do a little writing while I'm there. Other times I'll write on the road and with an eye to incorporating it later. Sometimes we'll have an overarching idea, often based on what favorite director we're going to rip off. You know, we're looking like certain locations are just perfect to rip off films that we adore. Other times, I have no idea what's going to come out of this. We know it's good. We shoot a hell of a lot in mainland China, in the Shanghai show, for instance. We hand it over to one of 3 really talented editors, and then I get a rough cut back. It's like an hour and 15-minute long, very roughly assembled cut with scratch narration, meaning it's the editor's voice, supposedly me, talking about what's going on camera, so that it's clear to me, you know, and I'll rewrite that along the lines of, you know, and next we go to do this, next we go to do that. It's a very fluid system. It's a lot like, since we're all so close, it's like a lot like being in a band. You know, some songs the lead guitarist kind of starts off working his way through. Other times it's the drummer. Sometimes you have lyrics. Sometimes you only have music. It's exactly like that. I think if there's one single unifying thing, it's what film do we want to rip off? What look? Who are we doing Robert Rodriguez this week? Are we doing, you know, early Antonioni? You know, we're thinking a lot about soundtrack and music. You know, Germany definitely going Kraftwerk all the way. You know, Hong Kong, we're looking to rip off new Asian cinema and a very jumpy look. So, you know, that's the fun part and the challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for coming out here to visit us. One of the things that I respect about you is that you actually kind of highlight and respect the cultures that you visit, and and as you mentioned earlier, you never say no to your hosts. So, and what I'm kind of wondering, it's sort of related to that. I'm just kind of curious. You eat so many things that most of us here may not think about eating, and I'm wondering how often and how do you get sick? And when you're filming, how long of that portion of time that you're visiting somewhere are you kind of like in bed, with stomach ache?
By eating what locals eat, I generally manage to avoid getting sick. I mean, a crowded place serving you don't know what in any country is a good sign if it's crowded with locals. I mean, if it's crowded with Americans, you're in trouble. You're eating in Indonesia, the Hard Rock Cafe is probably not the place you want to go. We have a pool on the show, who's going to get sick first, and it's always the ones on the crew who are most concerned about sanitation, who are wiping themselves down with Purell every time they go to the bathroom, and they always get sick from like the hotel, club sandwich by the pool. It's they gave in and they're tired of eating local and they go for the club sandwich at the breakfast buffet. I do spend the occasional few hours in a fetal position on a cold tile floor, but usually that's alcohol related. Russia, there is no escape. What do? I'm afraid of Russia, a country where even every 90-year-old grandmother can drink me under the table and carry me home afterwards. Because again, it's personal. You're not making the Russians are not the most friendly people in the world initially, and it's really only around halfway down the bottle that you start getting all kind of morose and "I love you, man," and But I mean, a standard day for me in Russia, the first time we shot, there was 3 shots for breakfast, 7 shots for lunch, 17 shots for dinner. No way out. Nothing else is hitting the table. You get a bottle of warm vodka and a little pitcher of cranberry juice, which you never mix together. That would be horrifying. And of course, every drink is personal. What do you say? Your waiter's doing it to you. This is to the spirit of international cooperation. Oh, okay, sure. This is to the great war, the great patriotic war, and the sacrifice of Russian and American soldiers in overthrowing the fascist imperialism. Okay, fine. This is to our mothers. What are you going to do? Say, fuck your mother. You're just hoping that you get out of the restaurant in a state of verticality before you throw up all over yourself, Yeah.
My fiance loved you, and I love your show, and actually that guy asked my question. So specifically, how were you after eating the lower intestine from the pig, the calamari?
2 weeks of Cipro. Antibiotics are a great thing. When you need them, it's good to know they're there.
And that's another just random question. Where are the next couple places in the world that you'd like to go?
Well, we're headed to Laos, and where I've never been, and back to Tokyo. And we did a show there for the old series on Food Network, but I'm really, really looking forward to that. And Papua New Guinea, Colombia. We're hoping to get into Tehran to shoot. Spain. It's a big world, and I could just keep going back to China. And will, at every opportunity. So. Those are in the very near future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks for being here. So you're obviously influenced by really good music. I mean, and you grew up in the right city for it. Richard Hell, Tom Verlaine, you mentioned. But I was wondering, in particular, about your writing. If there's any authors that have influenced you, writing style-wise.
Well, I think it's really obvious that when I read Hunter Thompson for the first time at age 12. I was 12 years old, and he was being serialized in Rolling Stone, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And it was just the top of my head lifted off. I just thought, oh my God, this is so powerful, this language. It's so heartfelt, it's so passionate, it's so hyperbolic, it's so true, and it's saying things that just no one else was saying. Maybe not the best role model for a 12-year-old, but obviously a big influence on me. William Burroughs was a big influence. The crime writing of George V. Higgins, who nails dialogue. That's the benchmark for realistic dialogue. You know, those are writers who I think, Graham Greene for his content and his sort of spoiled romanticism and you know, his failed Catholicism, his failed communism, his failed romanticism. You know, I love that stuff. You know, to me, The Quiet American, I read it every year. To me, it's a happy story. You know, dying of a broken heart, unloved in Vietnam. Sounds pretty good. So those are big influences on me. And I think if you're an aspiring writer, and when I get writer's block, I read, you know, I read old Elmore Leonard. You know, that is a professional writer. You know, really useful to see how he gets in and out of stuff, and without taking himself too seriously.
Thank you.
Sure.
You were famously filming in Beirut in 2006 when the war broke out. And you wrote about it in Salon and told a bunch of stories about the evacuation. Were there any stories you didn't get to tell? Any images that you wish you could share again? And I guess, was that the worst thing on a global scale that you saw while traveling so far? Or?
It was the most heartbreaking thing. You know, it was the most deeply discouraging, heartbreaking thing I've ever seen. You know, we showed you, we didn't shoot much. We didn't think we were shooting an episode when we were there. We were just trying to not go crazy. And then when we were convinced when we got back to New York, our partner said, listen, sit down for an interview and then see what we do with the footage, and let's see whether we can make something, you know, respectful out of this. It was a really poisoned my attitude in a lot of ways. I'd become very naive in a sense. I'd lost a lot of cynicism that I'd collected or gotten over the years in kitchens. You know, I'd become a lot more hopeful about the world, being the recipient of so many random acts of kindness from strangers around the world. I'd begun to get a little starry-eyed about the possibility of, you know, wow, we seem to get along with everybody. You know, if you just sit down at the table, everything's going to be okay. And then to realize that it really doesn't matter how nice you are, how forward-thinking, how tolerant, how hip, how good your food is, how pro-American, you know, how much of a Rumsfeldian dream of a Middle East Beirut was. You know, everybody will just stand back and watch you bomb back 20 years for no good reason at all. That was a very nasty lesson to learn, and it took a long time to kind of gather up enough optimism to go out on the road and make snarky travel food TV. I'm still really bitter about it, and I want very, very badly to go back to Beirut and have the opportunity to show people how good the food is and how great, how uniquely wonderful that city is.
I think we all look forward to the Tehran episode then.
Nice.
On a much lighter note, I'm curious, given your background in food and television, to see what you think of the whole Iron Chef America phenomenon. Do you laugh at it? Do you think it's total bullshit? Do you think it actually contributes at all to public understanding of what chefs do?
You know, I'm really good friends with Mario Batali, and he loves doing that show. I mean, he really enjoys doing the show because he wins all the time. It is a real competition. They have a half an hour to consider their secret ingredient. It is something of a carnival and a freak show, and maybe it does. I mean, should we be taking professional cooking that seriously? I don't know. So I'm okay with it. I mean, okay, Chairman Kaga is, an actor. I can live with that. Your waiter at the restaurant doesn't really like you, so, a certain amount of pretend is okay with me. I'm a little concerned, like, who is Kat Cora? I'm just asking. I mean, I know Bobby Flay had a lot of restaurants, and has been around a long time, been in the business. Mario, certainly a lot of restaurants. I know who he is. Morimoto, I know. This is a Kat Cora person. Did they grow her in a petri dish at Food Network? Is this it's kind of like the NSYNC of chefs, they think industry creation. I'm a little concerned. I understand she has a SAG card, which is kind of problematic for me. A chef, should you be in the Screen Actors Guild? I'm thinking no. But I like it. I love those cooking competition shows. I watch them all. I watch Next Iron Chef America. I watch all of them but Hell's Kitchen. That was just that was like the most cruel carnival freak show ever. I mean, I like Gordon Ramsay, he's a friend, but did you ever believe for a second, would you hire any of those guys? I mean, they were clearly, all of them, the technical ability of mollusks. I mean, they just stood there like lonely, hopeless, talentless, helpless freaks waiting for the axe to fall. And it just seemed pointlessly cruel. It was immediately obvious that none of them could hold down a job for 2 hours at Dunkin' Fries in a clam shack. So it just seemed pointlessly cruel. And this is me talking. So, and of course, I love Top Chef. Love it. Hung totally deserved to win. So I just want to let's set the record straight there right away. He totally deserved to win. And oh, he was so mean. He spilled the truffle oil and didn't clean up afterwards. You want a nice chef or a good chef? Hi.
Well, thanks for all the questions, everyone. That's all we have time for. But Mr. Bourdain will sign books if you want to line up.
Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And thank you.